It is 6:32 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated, and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Haden, Chomphosy.
Here.
Loudon. Here. Ryherd.
Here.
Ring. Here. Schmid.
Here.
Chosy.
Here.
Carpenter Davis.
Here. All right, thank you. Our first item of business tonight is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item not on our agenda tonight? Seeing none, assuming none online as well. We will now move into our items from the Planning Commission. We have one item coming forward from the Planning Commission this evening for consideration of a special use permit for a sign package for the lanes at Mission Bowl from Brian Scott.
Okay, thank you. So the lanes of Mission Bowl, formerly the residents of Rock Creek, formerly Mission Bowl, the 176 unit multifamily development project located at 5399 Martway. This project was approved 2 years ago and it's nearing completion. And they've submitted a sign package to us for review. And it's a pretty extensive sign package, including a blade sign in the front of the building, as well as smaller blade signs for each of the live work units and the various signs for the parking garage, entrance to the building, designating the dog park area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So typically we review all of this as a private sign criteria, and we do that when the final development plan is submitted. And for whatever reason, that just kind of slipped through the cracks. So we're kind of doing a backdoor approval of this, which would require a special use permit that's submitted to the city council. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions?
Any questions?
I thought the signage looked good in them.
Yeah, will be a nice project when it's done.
All righty, thank you. And moving into public presentations, we have one public presentation this evening for a review of 5665 Foxridge multifamily project from Laura Smith.
Well, I'm just here to make the introduction this evening. Mr. Aaron Messmer with Black Real Estate is here to kind of just give an update on their 5665 Foxridge project, which has been through the planning entitlement process. They currently have an approved final development plan for the project, but it's been a while since we've seen it. And for some, you probably have never seen all of the details or understood that. So they do plan to submit a request for tax increment financing incentives. And so before we dive into that in the coming weeks and months, we wanted to just reintroduce that project to you all and try to answer any questions. So we are not here this evening to negotiate any specifics of any development agreements. We're premature in that regard, but I would invite Mr. Messmer up to kind of share with you and reintroduce their project.
Thank you, Laura. Aaron Messmer, Black Real Estate Services, 4622 Pennsylvania, Kansas City, Missouri. We do have a presentation. Did you have a chance to load that onto the deal there? As Laura mentioned, we have been through the planning and approval process on the site, worked with the city of Mission to come up with what we think is a great plan A little over 300 units would be located on the property, removing the former JCPenney call center, which, as Brian has left me a note this evening, could use some remediation. So that's what we're working on right now. And the slide presentation contains the images of the current property as well as kind of the future plans. There's a number of benefits to the future plans, including addressing the different street frontages with units that would have patios that come down to those things, making public improvements, significant amount of sidewalks and landscaping and so forth. In the vein of all of the Block Real Estate Services projects, some of which you may have seen around Kansas City and in other metro areas. Our projects really do go to the very top of the market in terms of the quality of both the interior and exterior of the buildings. That includes the finish levels that we use, the materials that we use on the outsides and the insides, as well as the amenity spaces that we provide for our residents. And so if you haven't been, we would love to invite you to take a tour of any of our current projects, including Galleria, which we recently opened at 115th and Metcalf about 2 years ago. The Apex at City Place is actually a mixed-use building that includes 377 apartment units and about 18,000 feet of commercial underneath. Those are two great examples. And then closer infill, we recently did a project at 44th and Washington, right across the street from St. Luke's. So any of those, if you have a chance, if you're nearby, I would encourage you to go in and physically take a look, because you will see what we do, I think, is a level above really what's been done in and around the marketplace for the most part. In fact, there were times when we were in value engineering meetings when I proposed changing the railing system from glass balconies to like cable systems. And Ken reminded me that if he wants to be a Class B developer, he'll let me know. So those are the kinds of things that we get into in the level of detail. But we're excited to bring that kind of quality to the city of Mission. We really like this project for a number of reasons. And in particular, just the opportunity to kind of showcase our talents here and do something that we think would be a great fit for this community. So this is an image of what you would see on the western side of the property, clubhouse. We can go to the next slide if you want. We'll kind of click through these pretty quick, just so we're efficient with your time tonight. If we can click through.
Did you bring your tab?
Yeah, there you go. This is the location of the project, which you can see is just north of northwest of Broadmoor Park on the east side of Metcalf there, basically at 56th and Foxridge. Go to the next slide. These are the existing conditions with the former JCPenney call center, vacant building, large parking lot, not a lot happening in terms of street engagement, no sidewalks, anything of that nature. And then this is the new plan. So what you can see from this plan is that there's a wide sidewalk that runs around the property. You can also see the amenity courtyard area that would be central to the property. And then one thing that you probably notice here is we've got some guest parking on the west side, but the rest of the parking is entirely buried into the project itself. So it's a podium design where all of the parking of all the cars is contained underneath the building. We are designing this with electrical vehicle charging stations. That's not just a priority for us, but it's also just a market demand driver. And so some of that is just building enough for today and then probably providing conduit and capacity from an electrical standpoint to meet the demand that we know is going to come tomorrow as well. So you can see the orientation here with the clubhouse on the west side. There will be units on top of that as well. And then again, the units all around, both interior facing and exterior facing. We've got this one. We can go to the next one. So this would be the corner of 56th and Foxridge. You can see the landscaping that we would do at the base of the building. One of the things to note is that we use masonry construction at the bases of all of our buildings. That helps the longevity of those projects to make sure that they are attractive and not beat up over time. And it's just one of the things that we found makes it of higher quality. Next slide, please. We do have, and this was part of our work with the city and the design team, planning staff. What you'll see is the bike areas and pet washing stations and things like that, which we do have. They're located on this eastern side of the property, but those are made to look like storefronts, a little bit more appealing in terms of street activation. There's some seating in those areas too, and just some of those details that we work through. We can go to the next one. And this is another image of that. Keep going. On the south side of the property, you can see there's probably going to be a gathering space, some sort of amenity area, and then a wide sidewalk. You can also see the units themselves come out and address the street or the other properties that are adjoining to ours. So you'll have a number of residents that can walk out their door, walk down the steps, and be out in the community. This just gives you a plan perspective in terms of how the building itself lays out. We can keep going. And then you can also see as the building steps up to level 5, the level 5 is really only on the western portion of the property that faces Metcalf. And then we step down as we move to the eastern side of the property and address Foxridge. So I think that's pretty much it. There may be, just for discussion, anything else that you may want to ask, or we can certainly talk a little bit more about our plan for the tax increment financing going forward. But we have submitted the information to the city's consultant. We are aware of the prior precedents on the other projects that have been done, including Mission Bowl, which Brian just talked about, as well as Millhouse's deal and some of the other ones. We do plan to meet the Green Globe standard. So I know that's a priority of this body and of the city. And so we're intending to do that. And then also working with the city on a contribution to what would be an attainable or affordable housing fund that you could use at your discretion. We don't necessarily have the ability to incorporate that into the project. Frankly, it's really a different business in and of itself, but in similar fashion what Millhouse did, something along those lines, we think we can make work. So we're going to try to do that as well. So that's where we are. The consultant has the numbers. I don't know, Laura, if you have a recommendation from them or what the next steps would be on that. But like I said, we're certainly happy to answer any questions and talk through whatever things we might need to tonight.
Great. Thank you. Yep, we'll go Debbie first. I have 3 questions. Number 1, had you considered any of the parking area to be pervious?
In terms of the existing surfaces, I don't believe that the existing parking lot, I believe the existing parking lot is impervious.
I wondered if any of your plan included pervious parking in any of the development.
I think that we actually, it's my speculation, I'm not an engineer, but I think our impervious area actually goes down with our project, and the ability to get water where it's supposed to go goes up. Because we're actively managing that throughout the whole project, but we also are, I think, actually increasing the amount of green space that's on the site.
Second, how many elevators do you have in the development?
Oh, a lot. We can go back to the floor plan, but you got to put them all over where you have obviously access on different ends of the building. If we can go back to the presentation, we can go to the floor plan. One of the things that we also do in our projects, and I didn't really emphasize this because it's sort of blocking and tackling, but if we go to the actual architectural plans, first level, what you'll see here is that we'll create spaces where you can actually, we'll pull the garbage trucks in off the street, we'll pull the moving trucks in off the street. So when you have 300 units, assume that 150 of those people a year are moving. That's one every other day. So you're going to have moving trucks, you're going to have garbage trucks. And what we like to do, particularly for the moving, is create a bay for them that is covered. And in this case, because you have the tall parking garage, you can do that within the structure of the garage, right? So you're getting it off the street. There's not a moving van sitting on Foxridge all day or people running in and out of the street. And then what you do is you actually create a deal where you can load that out at grade, and then you take it straight to the freight elevator. So you build an oversized elevator for that, that allows them to get to the floor so that you're not having to haul the couches up the stairs. That's just part of being first class. So you'll see that there. And then as far as elevators go, they're going to be located within the project. You got 1, 2, probably 3, maybe 4 areas where you're going to have elevators here. Yeah, there you go. So you can see that.
And the last one, could you give me the price range of the apartments, please?
Oh, it's hard to say today, in terms of what that's going to be, because it'll be 2 or 3 years of construction compared to, where we're at in the market today. Let me tell you what we have projected here. Right now, you're looking at anywhere from $1,568 for the smaller units to about $2,800 for the larger units. We do have 10 exceptionally large, like penthouse type units, and those are in a different category, but those would be more expensive than that.
Yeah, Sally.
Yeah, so I just had one clarification and then a question, which first you were talking about other projects that are precedent. So I did just want to make sure that you all were aware under our policies that, one project is, and the TIF package granted is not actually precedential for a future project. So I just wanted to flag that for you all.
Yeah, we're definitely not taking anything for granted. We're going to come in and stand our own 2 feet for sure, but we're certainly using those as guideposts for what's been acceptable in the past.
Sure. And then on the green globes, was that a 1 green globe rating or what
Yeah,
rating are
I
you
think
talking
so.
about?
I think that's what the other projects have done.
Okay, I would say, several of those other projects had other components, like for example, the attainable housing. So, I think before you come back, it would be my preference that you perhaps revisit that if attainable housing is off the table and you're talking about building, class A projects for the future, really trying to push on that sustainability piece. I think we have done some balancing as a governing body in terms of our different, policy preferences in connection with incentives.
Sure.
But if one's going to be out entirely, then I would encourage you to really consider beefing up the other.
Yeah, and I think on the affordable or attainable side, I think it looks more like just stroking you guys a check. And so if you say, hey, don't spend that money on that, spend it on more sustainable efforts, we're certainly happy to do that as well. We'll follow your guidance there.
Do you know by now or at this point if parking is going to have an extra charge on top of those leases, or if that's kind of included within the rent?
Yeah, so typically on our podium style communities, the first space is always included in the rent.
Okay.
And the idea is that you're not forcing those people to try to game the street parking or anything like that. In fact, in Kansas City, Missouri, when we made our deal with them, they specifically said, like, you have to make people use their spot. Even if they don't have a car, they have a spot. And then if you want more than one spot, then you pay for the second space.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Appreciate that. Any other questions?
Aaron, remind us how many total parking spaces are in the project?
Oh, I don't.
It's too little. I can't.
Yeah, the covered parking structure has 446. And then there are more outside of the covered parking structure that would be in that parking lot that's on the west side of the clubhouse and management office. So
Okay.
probably somewhere in the upper fours.
Yeah, Debbie.
Is there a traffic study included in this development plan?
We've already done the traffic study and been through that exercise with the city. So that's been fully vetted for sure.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we will move on to action items. Oh, yeah, Leah.
So is it how, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, what's the options?
Yeah, so right now, we do an executive unit, which is a 1 bedroom, but it's a smaller 1 bedroom. We have 28 of those at 640 feet. We have 157 1 bedrooms at 796 feet. We have 112 2 bedrooms at 1,193 feet. And we have 10 3 bedrooms at 2247 square feet. So those are the penthouse type units. Mm-hmm.
All right, well, with no other questions or comments, thank you so much, Aaron, for coming down and
Thank you very much for your time.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right, we will now be moving into action items. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the June 5th Community Development Committee meeting were included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Any comments, or otherwise I'll take a recommendation. Great, thank you. Next, we will consider an interlocal agreement for the 2025 CARS project design from Brent Morgan.
Thank you very much. As you said, it's the interlocal agreement between us and Prairie Village for our 2025 CARS project, which is 63rd Street from Naldero Avenue, rehabilitation project. This project's a 3-inch mill and overlay, some full depth patching, sidewalk repairs, ADA ramp repairs, and some curb repairs and driveway approaches that have gone in disrepair along with the curb in front of them. So you kind of got to do both when you do that kind of work. This project's under design right now. This is just the agreement that allows us to invoice Prairie Village once the design work's complete. Total design costs are $32,466 at a 50/50 cost share of $16,233. The CARS project right now, preliminary estimates, $720,000. There's a 20% contingency once we get a little further through design. There's no cost associated with this interlocal. It's just the ability for us to get reimbursed from Prairie Village once the design work's complete. Be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Any questions, comments? Ben, you look, no? Okay.
No, just gonna, yes, please consent. Let them pay for some of this, yeah.
Thank you. Our final action item tonight will be consideration of a consent to the enlargement of the boundaries of the consolidated main sewer district with Johnson County wastewater from Stephanie. Okay.
I think I said I would do this.
Great. From Laura.
Brent can help me. So as I think everybody or most of you are aware, there are several properties on the north end of town who are currently on septic systems attached to Johnson County wastewater system. We've at various points over the years had some conversations with folks in the neighborhood about petitioning to become part of Johnson County wastewater sewer or the sewer district at a cost. And it's been quite some time since we had a sort of in-depth conversation. But this is a property at 6011 West 50th Street where actually there's a main that's adjacent to it. The property was in very poor condition. I think last week when I drove past, it's actually been demolished already. So it appears that they will be building a new home on that property. And I think they reached out initially to Johnson County wastewater to look at the connection and are willing to assume all of the fees in order to be able to do that. We have looked at kind of, I didn't realize there was a main that ran that close to any of the houses over there. And so Stephanie and I have looked at other options. It doesn't appear that there's another logical connection because I said, can we approach anybody else at the same time? But we can certainly sort of resurvey the neighborhood and see if there is an interest in re-engaging in that conversation. But this one, in order to bring them in, we just need to expand the boundaries of the sewer district to incorporate that property at 6011 West 50th Street.
Any questions? Yeah, Debbie.
Does the current property is on septic now?
Yes.
Yep, Ben.
What does it look like to try and rope in more of those houses? I mean, are these, there's very few houses not in the sewer district in Michigan.
And
correct?
typically, I believe you have to have 51% of the property owners who would sign a petition. And we've not been successful in meeting that 51% threshold in the past, in part due to cost. But I know the Johnson County wastewater is happy to sort of re-engage. I think they've had conversations with some other people recently and the idea gets floated, sort of.
One house just sitting there in the middle that's on the main and the rest not, so,
Yeah.
okay. I think ideally we would make that lift at some point, but.
I mean, it's crazy that the
Yeah,
houses
make-
closest to the wastewater treatment plant are not on the wastewater treatment system. But yeah.
So
Okay.
how does that work in terms of cost? You said, or did you say? Like,
So there would be a
dollars
cost.
at the waste, I mean, how does that?
Well, they estimate the cost of, I have to say, is one of the very first projects I worked on when I first got here. So I'm a little rusty on all of the details. But whatever cost is associated with, in this instance, to get others connected, that you would have to lay a new sanitary main. in addition to making the connection from each property to that main. The topography there, I don't know how complicated. Well, Brian probably, yeah, knows better.
Right.
Bail me out here.
Actually had some conversations with Johnson County Wastewater when they were initially talking about improving their treatment plant, because this neighborhood literally is in the backyard of the treatment plant. And they had reached out to the neighbors several years ago and had some pretty extensive conversations and actually did a survey. And so, yes, there'd be the cost for laying the main and the street. And then there's the cost for making the connection to the house to the main. And then because of the topography, the main and the street would actually be higher in a lot of cases than the house on the property. So there'd have to be a grinder pump at the house that would pump the effluent up to the main and then down the main to the treatment plant, or to a main somewhere to take it to the treatment plant. And so it gets to be a pretty expensive proposition. And a lot of the homeowners at that time were reluctant to take that on. And they're reluctant to take on the maintenance of the grinder pump. So that's an additional cost. It's not, most people just don't have anything like that, so it just goes away. But in this case, we do have a grinder pump that you have to maintain. So that's an additional cost, kind of ongoing cost.
Mary had one.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, everyone is responsible for their line to the main, right?
Correct. Yeah, so
Yes, I have found.
Every one of
filled
us,
out.
yes, regardless of, even if you're on the system currently, that,
yeah,
just like water from,
that main in the street is the public responsibility, but that connection to your home is the homeowner's responsibility.
Yeah. So it becomes really important if someone's selling their house. Is there a requirement now when you sell your property that it has to be on the main system?
no. But it oftentimes, and I think Councilmember Thomas experienced this, there are some, right, there, when you have the septic system, it's a different set of inspections and requirements and things that you may have to bring into conformance in order to get your properties sold related to maintenance of the septic
We
system.
do have a requirement in codes that any new construction has to be on the sanitary sewer main. It can't be on a septic. So I think that's probably what triggered this, since the house was demolished. It's a new construction, so.
Anything else? Take a recommendation.
Consent?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, that concludes our action items. We have one discussion item this evening for consideration of a tree preservation and protection ordinance from Justin Carroll.
Thank you. So this is a item that's been kind of discussed in various parts here locally for the city, and it's something that's kind of been taking root regionally in the Kansas City area. And that's just, you know, cities that are wanting to kind of protect and enhance their tree canopy. And so just kind of shoring up their ordinances in order to do that. And so staff's kind of been looking at this a little bit. I know there's various boards and commissions we have that have been asking about it. And just as we've kind of started down this path, there are some, and this is kind of noted in the sheet, there's just kind of some big policy questions that are kind of related to this that it'd probably be better that we have a conversation on and get some guidance on before we just kind of came out the gates with draft ordinance at this point. And so the first kind of bulleted list you see there is just that kind of describes what we currently have, which is pretty limited mostly to our street trees and our trees in our public spaces, or kind of like trees that are near utility lines, or if your tree, like if your property backs up to a park or something like that, like it's pretty restrictive. But there are some stuff we have on the books that relate to that. And then the other thing is we do have some general planting requirements in the zoning codes in terms of for like parking areas and landscaping and stuff like that. So there is some stuff there, but it's not in terms of, you know, the big one is a lot of people think of now as like tree protection. So that's like during any building projects, if these trees are staying, they're going to have orange fencing around them and they're going to be protected. Some sort of specific process for removing trees and then tree replacement. So those are kind of the three big ones that I kind of just want to discuss tonight. So I'll kind of just shift gears to those three topics. So I think the protection, as it says in the handout, I think that's pretty straightforward. Is just there's kind of some coalescing standard language on that front. Like I said, like it's usually to the drip line or something like that. Like if your trees have to be protected and on the site plans and stuff like that. Where it gets a little more tricky is as we move into tree removals is again, as it noted, is we're pretty limited in enforcement of removals. And so thinking about that in terms of the first piece of that is like code enforcement. So I think something that we'd like to explore and just get blessing on is kind of beefing up the nuisance language relating to trees. So if it's a dead tree or if it's a limb that looks questionable, you treat that as a codes enforcement issue and get that removed. Whereas currently, we don't really have the power to do that. So if there's a dead tree, and we get calls on that one, if there's a tree or a limb or something, I mean, there's nothing that kind of allows us to really regulate that except under specific circumstances. Where that one gets into a gray area is, no one in the region does this, but there are jurisdictions kind of on the coast or something where you could actually, the tree could regulate any sort of removal. If you're removing a tree or anything like that, you would have to have a permit for that. And some, looking at this in a previous life where I used to work at stuff, I think it's as an extremely intensive staff effort piece of that in terms of like every single tree has to get permitted. Again, it's just something to think about. Nobody in Kansas City has kind of bitten that one off yet, but just kind of thinking about where the line is it just during building projects and trees you're going to remove, or is it just related to, so that what I just laid out, or the nuisance type of tree removals, or would it be just, hey, I got a tree that I don't like and I'm going to remove it? I mean, in theory, we could require a permit for a removal such as that. And then that topic kind of dovetails into the last one, which is on the second page there, which is tree replacement. And so kind of the same question. Usually, so if we're taking these other steps and trees are going to get removed, we're going to require replacements. This is most usually straightforward in terms of a building project. So a commercial or residential, if they're taking out trees, they're marking them on a site plan, we're going to require, and it's not included in here, but there's, if you remove 3 trees that are this size, we would require 6 trees of, 2-inch caliper. There's kind of a breakdown of that depending on how many you remove, but we would require them to go back into place. But again, like I said, that's the usual way it's being handled for places in the metro right now. It's on building, kind of more building project specific. But I mean, there's nothing to say if it was a nuisance tree, you could technically require it get replanted, or any tree, if somebody just wanted to remove a tree, you could require replanting. So those are kind of I think the main issues is where's kind of the limits? Is it just tied more to building projects, or is there a desire to look at this just citywide, and what would that take to enforce and require permitting for that? I think is kind of really the big issue that we are kind of looking for some guidance on.
Yeah. So what is the benefit to having homeowners get a permit to remove a tree on their property?
Well, depending on how it would be structured, it would be, you might not be allowed to just remove a tree on your property if it had to be under certain parameters. You could say too, I mean, if you wanted it as a revenue generator, if we were going to rubber stamp tree removals, but we wanted to track them, I mean, that could be a fee that could be charged, that could generate revenue, but that would be, again, kind of a policy thing of some places won't let you remove trees except for specific reasons, or if we were just wanting to track removals. I think it's still a pretty intensive, just a lot of administrative work, however, associated with that, if it's beyond like a project.
So it's not like a safety issue to make sure that they're getting an actual tree company to do it instead of,
That's actually a great,
you know.
depending on how rigorous that this could be structured, that's exactly how it actually could be. In terms of requiring, like, you can only have certain companies that have to be licensed and insured. And I know some jurisdictions that do that. So they're actually vetting those companies and like providing a list, we're not recommending, staff isn't recommending a company, but these are all the ones that have been approved to do tree work in the city. So there is a higher administrative burden there, but that is a path to go down to, is to ensure more quality tree work as well.
So I guess I'm imagining that, let's say there's a, older person on a fixed income who's got this nasty tree in their yard that could fall over at any minute. Neighbor complains, they're afraid it's going to fall in their house. So they're having to get a permit, come down, get a permit, get someone to take it out and then they're having to pay for a new tree to be planted in their yard.
Potentially. And that's another thing to consider. I just want to be fully transparent too. As we move into this, if there is for the nuisance piece of that, I mean, if it's a large enough tree that's causing it, I mean, that could be a $6, $7, $8, $10,000 nuisance ticket we're essentially giving someone to actually remove it. Now, obviously, there's a safety concern to balance that, but it's a much larger cost than someone that's not mowing their lawn.
I think we've also looked at tree removals under the Mission Possible program. So there's some grant opportunities if someone finds themselves in that situation where we could apply those funds.
So when someone from the city came to say, hey, there's a problem with the tree, but here's a list of potential contractors to take it out, and here's some funding that would help you with this, is that how that would work?
Yes, we could
Can we
certainly.
make sure that that's how.
Well, and that's why we're having the conversation. Yeah. And that's depending on the level of regulation, if we want to start ensuring like the actual providers, that's another layer on top of that too, to require the standard requirements and then essentially having them get what would amount to like an occupational, a license basically to do business.
Okay, and my other thing is, so big picture, this is really to kind of manage our tree canopy. I mean, that's the whole kind of emphasis behind this in the first place, to make sure that we are keeping our trees safe and healthy and plentiful, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure I got it.
I think the easiest way to think about this is there's scenarios. You see this more in the cities that are having housing projects, but it's when someone purchases a property, knocks the house down and clear cuts an entire lot. Not to say it's not happening with commercial, but that's really the one that sticks out that gets people upset a little bit.
So from that all the way down to the end individual.
Yep.
I kind of, it's got to be a balancing act, because if there is someone who buys, a property, owns the property, and it has 10 trees and they get tired of, doing the leaves, they're not allowed to take trees out just because they want to.
Well, that's your
That's
choice. That's one of the things we're looking for. That's kind of one of those decision points for you all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the biggest one is it just kind of the nuisancy, if there's a issue with the tree, we would enforce it as a codes issue, and then everything else falls under more building permits. If it's just related to building permits and projects, that's where we're kind of doing the enforcement. Or do you all want it a step further where it could be any situation where if someone's tired of leaves and I want to remove my tree, they got to come down here and get a permit and get permission before they can do that, or they could get a ticket.
I guess one of my questions too, in the event that we have like another microburst or something falls over, are we also requiring, or I guess it's a question for council as well. Are we wanting those people to also replace those trees that fall over? Cause since we've bought our house in Mission, we've had 3 giant trees fall over in our yard, and replacing all of that can be a lot. So I don't know. I guess that's another thought there too, if that's part of that language. I have no problem. I support, if you're choosing to take down a tree, to have to kind of replace it with something else, especially if it's a smaller tree, it's not going to have as much of a leaf issue. I want to maintain our tree canopy here in Mission. That's definitely something important to me. And surely I would assume if someone's buying a house in Mission, they understand it comes with a lot of mature trees, just given the area. But yeah, I guess that's
Yeah, I mean, I think that's from our perspective, really one of the biggest decision points here, just from an administrative standpoint. Would we be creating a regulation that just causes people to work around it in some fashion? I mean, if you wanted to go down the path of requiring replacement, you could likely write language in the code that would exempt trees that were damaged by a storm, for example, right? Down by a natural cause.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing that we hear about, as we've had conversations with Evergy, or as we've had storms, and we often hear neighbors say, my neighbor has this dead tree in their backyard, and every time the wind blows, it's knocking our power out, kind of thing. And again, as Justin mentioned, we're just somewhat limited right now in our ability to go in and regulate that. So it's sort of a tree canopy, but also preservation and resiliency, kind of during storms. that I think we want to think about as well.
Right. And I certainly support it from a safety standpoint, from someone else's property, that becoming an issue for sure. So, yeah, sorry, I paused it. We'll go Debbie and then Cheryl and then we'll just go down.
This is kind of a sweet versus sour. I have no problem with us educating the population at large about tree preservation and why we keep them and stuff. I am definitely not in favor of permitting every single that is a no. You know, if you want to do it on city property or where they're doing projects or things like that and govern that, but to go to definitely no.
Yep. No, and that's, yeah, that is, I guess I would say the Rubicon that has not been crossed in the metro anywhere. There are certainly places on the coast that do
That's why we don't.
that do
go to
that.
coast.
Yep. So that's why we're having this conversation.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Again, I appreciate all the work on this. I think I agree with Debbie. There's going to have to be a lot of education because some of their newer residents don't understand that the trees, you know, within their property aren't the responsibility of the city when they're close to the street. And the other thing is with some of their creeks, especially in our ward, I don't know if they'd have to replace the tree because they're so thick at this point in time and they're becoming dangerous in a way with the storms we've had. So a lot of education that would have to go into this. And I agree with you. I don't want to be a lot of enforcement because that's something as a small city, I don't know that we can take on, but definitely some education really needs to be done, especially after these recent storms.
Yeah, so I think the obvious one and the highest priority should be if we have safety issues, let's give ourselves room to enforce. You can't have a dead tree that's falling over, knocking out power, you know, beating up other people's roofs, beating up your own roof. To that extent, I kind of feel like it could look a little bit, I don't want to tug on sore spots, but like the old smack, like how many houses is this going to destroy if it floods type of deal? Like if there's a dead tree off in the middle of some acreage, whatever, right? I don't know how we get around all that, but yeah, like Cheryl said, there's some stream banks, you know, behind my house, for example, used to be at least before we did the civil engineering work back there, but there's trees just falling down back there all the time and uprooting themselves and whatever else. So you could get into the weeds, literally and figuratively. So I think taking a light touch on, you know, enforcement of like permitting removals or, you know, disallowing removals, that kind of thing is the right thing to do. I think it's a great idea to look at, especially as a project or a parcel gets bigger, or you're talking about disturbing more or, you know, older, bigger trees. Commercial or multifamily, if we're going to be clear cutting a lot, let's, you know, beef up. If we feel we need to beef up the zoning and code language around making sure that we're not losing just big swaths of tree canopy. But I agree that it's probably not a great idea to go around telling everybody you got to permit every single removal or even to put any kind of heavy hand on that. Are there, the last question I had is, are there particular issues aside from enforcement of dangerous trees that is spurring some of this on? Are we just kind of reviewing Mark model ordinance and just doing some good governance here, getting ahead of stuff? I don't know, is there like a recommendation from PRT or have they chewed on this at all?
Well, one of the recommendations out of the comp plan was a tree canopy ordinance.
Okay.
You know, what would that look like? How that feels? That's
Yeah.
kind of what precipitated this discussion tonight.
Yeah, I think from comp planning and especially climate action and resiliency, I'm pretty interested in, you know, what is that sort of natural carbon capture potential and just variety of native species and reducing non-native species or invasive species. And some of those problem trees that we have, all that stuff is great. And to the extent that we can find ways to, you know, beef up our efforts on that without being, I think, heavy-handed on especially individual residents and homeowners, that would be the ideal for me.
Josepha has a question.
So administrative burden has come up a bit in the discussion so far, and I wondered if there is a sense for the current volume of calls on unanswerable nuisance or danger limb sorts of trees. Like, can we get a sense for what that enforcement volume would be based on that?
It's been a lot.
Tons? Okay.
What does that mean? What is a lot?
Trees have been, dead trees or dying trees have been kind of the hot button issue for code enforcement this summer. And a lot of that precipitated from the storm last summer where You know, people spent weeks cleaning up their yards afterwards and trees down all over town. So when anybody sees a tree that is dead or looks like it's dying, they get very anxious about that and they'll call the city. And if it's within the right of way, then we have more authority under the current ordinance to take some action. But if it's close to the house or in the backyard, that's where it gets a little gray, and we're kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit now in the enforcement of that. And it is expensive. We're starting to get some pushback about, you know, I have to pay how much to get the tree removed? And we are trying, you know, suggesting to people that we have grant programs that are available. Sometimes they don't qualify for the grant programs, so.
Well, I think there's a lot of education that still needs to occur. I mean, one of the challenges I think people have is trees may look fine, but if they haven't been maintained appropriately over time, they're weakened and, you know, and then all of a sudden you end up with a tree that's not structurally, you know, able to survive some sort of storm or something like that. I have flashbacks, probably the chief does as well, to the big limb that came down and almost crushed one of our police patrol vehicles driving down Lamar several years ago, just gave way and came sort of crashing down. So I do think there's that. And we have trees on our own property that we still need to sort of address and, you know, and clean up. But I think there's education about diversity of species, about location of planting, in addition to the, you know, whatever additional teeth we may want to put in an ordinance that allows us to present that. You know, for example, we, when we lose a tree on public property, and this is an issue that we went through with PRT several years ago, they wanted us to immediately go back and put a tree in exactly that same spot. And I think we've moved away from that to say, let's evaluate, was it planted appropriately, kind of to this question about, you know, trees along creeks and that sort of thing. Were they planted in an appropriate location to begin with? And are we setting ourselves up for, you know, future failure? So we're trying to be smarter as we manage at least the canopy on public property as well. And then, one thing, somebody mentioned about PRT. So at PRT, obviously, and Sustainability Commission both have an interest in an ordinance like this, which is part of why we didn't bring it to you as an action item, and if I'm still in your, but wanted to get some of that feedback and probably circulate it through those bodies for their feedback before we bring it back to you, or if that's sort of what you would prefer.
Let's do Sally, then Brian, and then Yeah, I just have one comment related to the tree protection and the tree replacement in connection with construction projects. I would like to see that apply to both residential and commercial. I think a lot of where that's come up around town is in the tear down rebuilds, which we're starting to see more of. Especially with some of our smaller lots, you know, you don't want someone to try to build on the entire lot and take out the only big tree. But so I know there was some discussion about not burdening residential owners, but I think that's minimal, you know, if there's a big reconstruction project.
Yeah, this topic, particularly of tree removal for those that are dead or dying, is fairly near and dear to my heart. As like my own home no longer has a fence because of a dead or dying tree that had a branch that fell on it. Kind of in a disputed property. We didn't know who it was. So I just took it down. Absolutely feel like the cost, and I get that. It was, you know, several $1,000s to take it out. The reason I bring this up is when it came down safely, but I mean, it left craters in our yard taking this down. And I remember when I was watching it, that could have been on the dog, could have been on me, could have been on other trees, could have been on a home. So I get that there's a cost associated with it, and I want to make sure that we do educate residents about what's available to help. But part of that education should also be the cost of what happens if it does come down and hit something is tremendous. So I think a lot of people don't really understand the damage they can do until they've really seen it. But when one of those 60, 80, 90 foot tree comes down, I mean, it wrecks everything it hits. So it's a huge safety issue.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
And one of the issues too is the trees along Shawnee Mission Parkway, I believe KDOT to a certain extent. And that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to address from the standpoint, KDOT sometimes doesn't come through. And if we're telling our citizens to do something that the state's not doing, that's going to be problematic, I think.
Leah, did you have?
I did. I just wanted to throw it out there. If we did decide that we wanted to go down the road of if you take a tree out, you've got to replace it. Maybe not on your property. Maybe if you really don't want to put another tree on your property, maybe you can make a donation to, you know, parks to plant a tree elsewhere, especially in those places where there's just a ton of, you know, trees. So just don't know where we're going with this yet, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, so if you'll humor me for a second, I get some nods or thumbs up. So education being the huge component. And then nuisance enforcement, cleaning that up so that there's some, and then keeping this more building project based, both residential and commercial is where we're looking at this. All right, perfect. Thank you.
Right, so that concludes action items. But before we adjourn this evening, Ms. Smith, are there any department updates for the Community Development Committee?
I don't know, Brent or Penn, do either one of you have any updates?
Mission Summer Family Picnic this Saturday. So begins officially 6 o'clock. We anticipate the laser light show occurring sometime around 9:30. And then, of course, all the family activities and festivities between there, and hot dog dinner, free drinks, ice pops are free. And then we're going to be selling some Dippin' Dots. So one of, and also selling adult beverages. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if we were gonna bring any of our cooling mechanisms from the market site, like the misting tint, and or is the fire department coming this time? Cause like Debbie, I saw it's even at like 8 o'clock at night, it's gonna be like 95 degrees on
Yeah,
Saturday.
the fire department will be there. We can speak with the market team and see if they're willing to share some of that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Ben.
Bring your own size.
So with the 2024 Cars Project, row from Johnson Drive to 63rd is scheduled to start August 5th. So the stormwater work will take place. We are gonna have to close row from 59th to Johnson Drive for about 4 or 5 days before school starts, because we got some big stormwater put in. It's about 14 feet deep. So they've got a set timeline and have that road open up before school starts, and then there'll be some traffic impacts, but we're shooting for August 5th. And then 55th Street reconstruction, we started removals today, so there's a lot going on there. The pavement, the curb, and the driveways are coming out, storms, all in and completed. So it'll be busy over there for about the next month and a half until we get pavement on the ground. Yes.
I have a question for you, something that happened to me today. So when there's a train and the 3 stoplights on Lamar, I sat through 3 of them in front of Quick Trip without any traffic moving whatsoever. Is that something that happens often or just to me today?
Often. It happens in the morning, and then whenever the train comes by, especially on the morning commute, that's when I see it. I mean, the goal would be when that bridge gets redone at some point. I mean, with those businesses, it's hard to bridge over the railroad or raise the railroad, but the railroad's a tough nut to crack. So it's going to be a long-term solution, but it just happens when the trains come through.
Okay, because it didn't really happen that much before the lights were installed, so.
I mean, the traffic signals were warranted from all the studies as a safety aspect, and they are on Unified Government's property, so we didn't have a lot of control about those going in. Or the timing, correct. But I mean, all the studies showed before they even started the wastewater construction, those signals were warranted on that bridge. So there is an additional lane that was recommended, but nobody was willing to foot that bill to widen that bridge out.
Yeah, I can imagine not. Okay, thank you.
You got it.
Just got the emails about funding opportunities for rail crossing removal. Brent, I had one more question about the road project when we were shutting down the road. I'm looking forward to all the traffic coming through my neighborhood, driving just mad as can be. So if there's any opportunity for enforcement and then just keeping an eye on things, that'd be great.
Yep. And
Anytime anything closes over there, they love to go through my neighborhood like crazy.
yeah, we had those discussions today. We were gonna use our message boards, probably get them out 3 weeks in advance, letting people know. I haven't seen the final traffic control plan today because we just made that decision today. But we'll get that on social media. Fairway is, Roland Park and Prairie Villages as well. So we're gonna try to coordinate that and make that work the best we can. But just from a safety aspect, the hole we're gonna have to open up down there and the big
Sure, yeah.
equipment, it's just not safe without.
No, you gotta do your work, but
Yeah.
look out for the folks caught off guard by it. I'm sure you're looking forward to it after the last one, yeah.
Lots of smiles.
Yeah, Debbie.
Just a couple things. If you haven't had an opportunity to go by Rushton, go by it and see what an awesome building that is. It looks so great. It's just worth looking at. Secondly, do we know what the situation is on Popeyes now? How long it's gonna be down?
Fence went up.
They've hired a contractor. The contractor is in the process of making all the utility disconnects. And my understanding is that they're still waiting on the gas utility disconnect. And once those utility disconnects are completed, then they can do the demolition. And I would imagine construction would start shortly thereafter. So.
Quickly for chief, it took me like 12 minutes to get out of my street and people were flying down Johnson Drive. If I had turned, I would have been hit. I mean, they were going like 45 miles an hour. Is there not a speed thing we can put up somewhere, a light or something on Johnson Drive at Lamar, just to see how fast people are going? I mean, they're really going beyond anything that's normal for speed.
We always keep one of our speed signs on Johnson Drive at different locations. They typically moves around every 2 weeks. And I can look at that. I'll look at the data from that and see where it's at to see what we might be able to do.
I will say on my way to work, because I take Johnson Drive and then get on to Row, I saw someone pulled over on Johnson Drive on my way and then saw someone pulled over on my way back. And I was like, I like to see that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're never gonna hear complaints from me about speed enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you a speeder?
No, you're never
No,
gonna hear
Love
complaints
to
from me
see
about
it
it.
enforced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just it kind of follow up on Councilmember Crane's comment, just a reminder that the council has been invited for a tour of Rushton next Tuesday at 4 p.m. So I'll get I RSVP'd for us all today and I'll get the details about where to meet and how to do that. So I think everybody's excited to see that. And then it was also included on your weekly calendar. But we have confirmed the Waterworks Park ribbon cutting for the 6th of August at 4 p.m. And Taste of Aloha has been scheduled.
In special honor of my birthday,
And
right?
it is the mayor's birthday. That will also be National Night Out for the police department. So more details on that to follow, kind of working through some of those kinds of things. But it's been a busy summer. Busy summer.
Sorry, adding that to my calendar before I forget. All right. Well, with no other comments, it is now 7:31 p.m. and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you.
Does anybody need a break or anything? No? All right, let's do it. It is now 7:31 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, we are also offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionchaos.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak, and we'll call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you're part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated, and we'll call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Haden, Chomphosy,
Here.
Loudon. Here. Ryherd. Here. Kring. Here. Schmid.
Here.
Josie.
Here.
Carpenter Davis.
Here.
Our first item of business is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now? Seeing none, we'll move on. We do not have any public presentations or items coming forward from the Planning Commission this evening. Therefore, we will move into our action items. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Robin Folks.
Thank you. Finance and Administration Committee meeting minutes from June 5th, 2024 were included for review and acceptance in your packet tonight.
Recommend acceptance on consent.
Yes.
Okay. Our second action item tonight is for consideration of revisions to Council Policy 102 related to purchasing and procurement from Laura Smith.
Thank you. I think we previewed this last month. We have had a goal for quite a while of going through our city council policies, of which there are now, I believe, 130. Well, that's not true. We start with 101, and go to 130. And kind of updating them. Many of them were put into place back in the early 2000s when Mission got its first city administrator, and many of them have not been touched since that time. It sort of becomes overwhelming to think about updating them all at once, so we've sort of been picking them off as appropriate and updating as we go along. One of the things, so we've had a focus on Council Policy 102 related to expenditure authorization. And it was highlighted again for us as we've been in conversation with KDOT regarding our bike share grant application. They didn't like our existing procurement and purchasing policy and suggested that we might want to consider some revisions. So they actually shared with us the City of Merriam's policy, which generally we have modeled the recommended revisions here to Council Policy 102. I think it also encapsulates another policy, Policy 115, which relates to how we purchase consultant services. So rather than having two separate policies and remembering to go look for those, we felt it would be wise to just combine those into this one policy. As we had kind of talked about, one of the biggest changes, this policy in many regards mirrors what we're doing already. Unlike the existing policy 102, there's some other things that have been identified as best practices or in consultation as we've gone through the annual audit each year that we've made adjustments. So this actually aligns more closely with how we're currently providing and approaching purchasing and procurement for the city. One of the biggest changes would be an increase in purchasing authority levels, both for the department heads. Currently, their expenditure limit is $1,000. And we would recommend increasing that to $5,000. My expenditure authority would go from $10,000 to $30,000, and then anything over $30,000 would still come to the governing body. The mayor and I did have a conversation. I think she had a good point. I don't think this policy was as explicit as it could be that that's related to budgeted expenses. And so I will, between now and next week, go in and kind of add a section there. That would be the intent. There is actually some language in section 104A3 that talks about the governing body determines the level of expenditure for each department through their approval of the annual budget. Governing body approval in and of itself is neither a permit nor a directive to expend funds unless the need exists. at the time of purchase and the good or service to be purchased is within the budgeted limits. So there's some protection there, but I think, to your point, Mayor, I think we can sort of strengthen that. And then, again, I think if we go to section, I believe it's 104, 105J, just near the end of the policy as it relates to emergency expenditures. I think, again, the mayor had a good suggestion of broadening that. If we think about how we've had to sort of utilize that authorization in the last year and a half, whether that's related to going ahead to place the order for the flooring for the indoor track at the community center, whether that's been vehicles or equipment because of supply chain issues. I don't know that those qualify as an emergency expenditure. So I will look at some language that more closely aligns without obviously giving free rein. And the department directors will tell you that there have been times when I've said to them, I don't feel comfortable moving forward with this when you got to go through the regular process. Be happy to answer any questions or any other thoughts or comments or feedback on the proposed policy changes. Okay. Because I need to make some minor changes, I would suggest perhaps let's go on the regular agenda if that's acceptable. Okay.
Great. Our third action item tonight is for consideration of an ordinance amending the city administrator's expenditure authority, also from Laura Smith.
So if, again, if the procurement policy, the changes to the procurement and purchasing policy are acceptable, we actually then do need to pass an ordinance because my expenditure authority is established in the municipal code. And so the ordinance that has been prepared would be to increase that from the current $10,000 to $30,000. Again, in the draft ordinance section 120-140A5, I will look at cleaning up the language there related to emergency repairs or emergency maintenance to city-owned facilities.
Any additional questions? No.
The other thing I would say is you probably saw in the red line, I just cleaned up pronouns. So whenever we touch an ordinance, we're trying to do that as we can.
And is that one going to also have budgeted expenses?
Yeah, I can add that language there as well.
Can I just ask one clarifying piece? Laura, you have years and years of experience. And, to me, the threshold for you is probably higher than anybody in Johnson County. I'm biased. But how would that work if somebody comes in after you? Is the threshold based on what it is region and county-wide, or is it based on a combination of that with experience and making judgment during emergencies and things like that?
Well, I think if you tie it to a budgeted expense, and some of the language already in the ordinance says control over all city purchase and expenditures in accordance with the budget. So there's some provision there, and I'll look to see if I can strengthen that. I think one of the bigger drivers is obviously size of city. As we saw a little bit in the chart, although interestingly enough, it's not necessarily the one and only predictor of expenditure authority. I think as we just look at the cost of goods and services, coupled with the fact that we are one of the few cities who only has a legislative meeting once a month. And so there are often times where it's challenging for us, or why we're sort of right up to the wire to get action items or agenda items prepared, because we're trying to meet that one deadline. Otherwise, we have to wait another 30 days. And particularly with some of the supply chain issues, most other cities can deal with that in 2 weeks down the road. So I think that's a factor as well, kind of bringing that in. And we've done some analysis, sort of more informal, and looking at what projects we would be able to just move forward without having to prepare an action item. I mean, so many of the routine things that fall under that $30,000 limit, you guys look at and you place on the consent agenda and we move on down the road. We've talked about, and I think would be happy to sort of then identify, and maybe it's in the interim financial report, any significant purchases that we've made that we think would be of interest, or if there are things that align with, oftentimes we will still bring you things under my expenditure authority currently because we want to highlight that. But I think we can find other ways to do that and share that information with you and the public that are more efficient than what we have. And you would always have the discretion to change it, but I would also believe that this council or any sitting future council would select a city administrator who you could trust to live within those expenditure parameters appropriately. And again, because of a minor change, I would suggest if it's
Yeah. I would
Regular
say I'd
agenda.
like to stay on
Regular.
Regular agenda, but
Okay.
I'm, yeah, certainly happy with what we've got here so far.
Great.
I think I get to stay here, don't I?
You get to stay there. Our next three action items relate to the consideration of resolutions for the intent to levy a property tax exceeding the revenue neutral rate for the city of Mission, Rock Creek Drainage District Number 1, and Rock Creek Drainage District Number 2, also from Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. So I think most of you will recall that thanks to legislation that was passed several years ago, we now are subject to revenue neutral rate calculations and considerations each year as a part of our annual budget process. The revenue neutral rate is the mill levy rate that would generate exactly the same amount of revenue in the coming budget year as we have in the current budget year. So no accounting for inflation, salary, wages, benefits, any of those kinds of things. And so part of the process now, as we go through our annual budget, is that if we intend to exceed the revenue neutral rate in our proposed budget, we have to pass a resolution of intent signaling to the county clerk that we plan to do that. And we have to provide notice to the county no later than July 20th so that they have time to prepare and send out notices to all of the property owners within the entire county. And we have to do that in the form of a resolution. So we've prepared 3 separate resolutions. And as a reminder, this is the maximum mill levy that we could impose in the 2025 budget, or for the 2025 budget. If you wanted to go down from that, which we are not recommending, and your budget has been built on maintaining the existing mill levies. I know we had a lot of conversation last year because we had the increase in the mill levy for the city's general budget. But these are those resolutions which would need to be considered and passed but next week, and then provided to the county no later than July 20th. So they indicate what our intended mill levy rate is, and also include the date and time for the public hearing. So in addition to a regular budget public hearing, part of that component that we would go through in August would be a hearing on revenue neutral rate. And because the drainage districts are separate taxing entities, of which the governing body is the board of each of our drainage districts, which is why you have 3 separate resolutions. So you have to take action to set that mill levy in for all 3 of those budgets. Be happy to answer any questions.
There any questions?
Yep. Well, I can fill the air with some hot air. Yeah, I think probably nobody's surprised that my impression of the revenue neutral rate requirements from the state are just a bit of somewhere between silly and trying to just hang albatrosses around our neck to run our cities the way that we need to. Nobody else on earth is expected to carry the same budget from year to year to year forever and ever. So this is, I feel like an exercise in a bit of silliness, considering we still have to go back and present the budget to the people and show them what we're going to do anyway.
Well, and it doesn't
my preference-
guarantee no
Sure.
tax increase for a property owner, because dependent on what the increase or decrease or maintenance of your assessed valuation is, it's really hard to determine how that's going to impact folks individually.
Yeah, I think folks that live in Mission are smart enough to see the budget and the actual rate that we're going to set when we put the budget forth. So I'm happy to send these memorandums for now, for next year, for the next year after that.
Okay, well, we have to take action every year, so This is the first year since it's happened that we haven't had to hold a special meeting to do it because of the way our council meeting dates align. So that's kind of nice. Okay,
Any other questions? If not,
regular agenda, I
Regular?
would say on this
Okay.
one, yes.
great. We have two discussion items this evening. The first is a discussion of the 2024 revised and 2025 proposed budgets from Laura Smith.
And I would, Mr. Chair, I do know that we have a member of our Family Adoption Committee who is here in the audience. So I'd certainly be willing to rearrange at the pleasure of the committee at your discretion and not make her sit through my budget
Yeah,
presentation.
I think that is fair and generous. So let's actually skip then to our second discussion item, which is a discussion of the family adoption program from Councilmember Carpenter Davis.
Well, good evening, council. I've served on the Mission Family Adoption Committee for a couple of years and made some observations, and Councilman Chomphosy has also served as liaison to that committee. So we're well aware of how well it goes and such. But I do want to recognize Kathy Lockhart. Thank you for coming tonight and feel free to contribute after my presentation. You have the Mission Family Adoption Committee, and several of these people have been long-serving members. Actually, some of them have served since the inception of this program, which was established in 2006. So if you want to go to the next slide, that's the list of everybody on the committee. And the next slide. This was created in 2006 by Councilmember Susie Gibbs at the time to support mission families. It began with 12 families serving, and as you can see, some of the pictures, some gift baskets at that point in time. In 2022, we supported the highest number, which was quite a few people, 102. And I want to say there was 102 families, but some of our families are 2, 6, and sometimes as large as 9 members of the family. So quite an impact. The committee works with the school social workers, and Kathy has done that a lot, to identify families. And this is usually socioeconomic factors such as free and reduced lunch to identify them. Obviously, if you want to go to the next one, the schools that we have served are 7 schools in this local area. And again, I want to say special thanks to the social workers that help us understand some of the challenges these families have. Next slide. Obviously, I mentioned the core group of committed volunteers, and it's not only the people on the committee itself, but we have some people that have been longstanding and participated in the community, this committee. Also, we have public works people. I'm just going to shout out to Brent, and then also Penn, and with everybody in Parks and Rec helping out as well. And then we have partners from Roland Park. They help with public works. So a lot of people invested. This is the nice thing about this is we have a committed group, but we seem to be dwindling in a few numbers just because as people have retired and moved on, or as people last year with volunteers, we had a tough time with people returning to work after being remote work because they lived in Mission, could come for a couple of hours, but now that they live in Mission but work in South Overland Park, they weren't able to give that time. But we know that a lot of residents look forward to this time of year. And if you've ever walked through the Powell Center during this time and those Christmas trees that have all those gifts on, it's wonderful to watch, and especially interaction with young kids that their parents are trying to teach them a lesson, or as we know, a grandma trying to teach a lesson to a child. That's always good too. And people take so much care to get the right gift, that it's I know they'll like this kind of thing. So food scarcity obviously continues to be an issue. We have now Trinity Lutheran, they have the food kitchen, the food pantry, a couple of Thursdays a month. Johnson County, Catholic Charities, they're all working overtime with this issue. So obviously, again, families served in 2023. And then that breakdown We have Mission residents were 30, Roland Park residents were 14, and then the other Northeast Johnson County cities were 46, and that was through the school. The budget, if you look at the budget, the next slide, our beginning balance, and this is what we use to buy food from harvesters or work with harvesters or Hy-Vee or any of the vendors. We have to have something in the bank, and Lynn Kring, I'll just give a shout out to him. He's Mr. Bargain guy, and he does this every day and looks to find these donations. Obviously, we have a lot of cash and check, and then the breweries, both breweries, they give tips. They give their tips. So that's a significant amount, $8,000. And then we also have a lot of people get gift cards, or they'll have gift cards, and we don't track that, and we don't track the amount people spend on the gifts. So the families identify the gifts they want, coats, different things, and we don't figure out what that total is, and that's quite extensive. We also get boxes donated from Lowe's, and Roland Park helps us with that. And so we also have a balance of $12,314 to carry into the next year. Now, this is where I really think is of note. We have a lot of in-kind contributions, and I mentioned this from the standpoint of a lot of our committee members and our volunteers, but we also have our human resources of mission, and that's something the council commits. And so, and the day of the event, obviously, Roland Park Public Works staff commit to this too. The police are not mentioned here, but I will tell you that the police do traffic control during this event sometimes, because it is so many people coming into the Powell Center and driving through. Obviously, the space, there's a lot of space that is dedicated to the Powell Center. Like I said, if you ever come through the day of the food distribution, we have a gym for basically the north gym can't be rented for 24 hours. And then in December, when we distribute the gifts, all 3 conference rooms on the north side are dedicated. During the December Christmas wrapping and all that, we have 1 room dedicated so we can wrap the gifts and as we're processing them, and then take them out to the storage unit. We have a storage unit at Powell Center, and then Casey's Automotive has been so gracious in allowing us to store some of the items there. And it's not the presents we're storing there, it's the food, because it has to be temperature controlled. And that's something new that's happened in the last few years. And then we have freezer storage, and you helped us at that with Public Works. And so I captured volunteer hours, and this is based on people signing in and such, but I know, Kathy, you could probably tell me how many hours that you dedicate to this. And there's hours that can't be counted. People planning, people doing, going out, buying gifts and bringing things in. So it's basically, 42 to 49 volunteers, and anywhere from 228 in November, when we're just distributing food, to a lot more hours in December. So I just put together a list of challenges that I want the council to consider and discuss. This is intense with human and physical resources. And given the increase in number of families we've served, it's not sustainable in the current form. When we had 106 families, that was a lot to keep track of. We have a spreadsheet from HWL something. It's huge, and it's hard sometimes when gifts get brought in that aren't labeled. And so it's a lot of coordination, a lot of stress. Our food boxes are packed with canned vegetables, peanut butter and everything, ham, poultry. It's not feasible to put anything more on that spreadsheet to say, oh, this person has peanut allergies, or, their cultural or religious beliefs can't be served by this type of food. Obviously, you all know, and sitting in this room, the food budget is increasing because food is expensive. And Harvesters is not receiving as many donations as they have in the past. We have a 2023 feasibility study that we conducted for the community center, and we've asked the community center to make sure that they are being judicious and making sure that we're meeting budget revenue. And so that's kind of flies in the way of during the holiday season. And Brent knows if we have a major snowstorm, our public works folks may not be able to go get the carts from Hy-Vee and be there to distribute some of the food and manage the pallets. And the donations from the local breweries obviously are a big portion of this budget right now. And what happens if they're not available? So, you know, I just think it's really important. This is such an important program for the community, and it's seen as such. But we need to be responsible with our revenues and our money and just in general. So the feasibility study I mentioned, and determine how this impacts future goals and expectations. I mentioned Trinity Lutheran Church. They are distributing, you know, food on 2 Thursdays a month. Maybe we partner with them in November and December. Is it possible that we're serving some of the same families? Because we did have families last year that said, oh, we already got our food, and we're not sure how that happened. We have gift cards. Gift cards can empower people to buy what they need, buy what fits, buy what color they want in something that they need. Maybe we should support one event rather than 2. Or maybe we should limit the participation to Mission and Roland Park families. Or consider a moratorium on the program for 1 year to gather data and develop a vision for future support of our families and Mission. We have not surveyed the social workers at this time, and I don't know if the needs are changing as we go along. Or we can say we're going to continue the current program without changes. I just wanted to bring this to you for your consideration and just to make sure that you were aware of what's going on. We're meeting in July, and so the committee will be discussing this, but would like some dialogue with this group.
Thank you for putting all that together. Before opening it up for discussion, if there's any member of the public here that wanted to speak about this at all, now would be the time. No? Okay. Great. No, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Now, yeah, any questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Thank you. I think, you know, it sounds like the food is a lot of work getting it to and from and storage and all of that. And I completely agree. Gift cards really do give people the dignity of choosing their own holiday celebration foods as opposed to whatever it is that we give them. I do something similar for my job, working with foster kids, gifts in kind. And that's one of the things that we really do focus on at Christmas time and other times. It's one of the reasons we only give kids new clothes, because they deserve the dignity to have a piece of clothing with a tag on it that no one else has worn. They deserve the dignity to move their stuff in suitcases as opposed to trash bags. And one of the things that we do with some of our families is set up a gift gallery so that the parents can come in and choose the gifts that they're giving to their children, because again, it adds just that little bit of dignity that they got to do the thing that everyone else gets to do. And I think, you know, if instead of doing the holiday, you know, packaged food, gift cards were given instead, that's going to take a huge amount of time and effort and energy and concentration and coordination off of your plate, so that you can focus on kind of the funner part of this, which is the community coming together to buy Christmas gifts for or holiday gifts for these families. And I know that that's a big change, and it would kind of maybe take away the harvesters part of it. It would maybe have to deal with more donations, but you can open this up to other churches in the community to say, here's what we're doing as a community. Would you care to join us in this endeavor? Because you don't have to do it all alone. And I know that there's a lot of great people in religious organizations in this area that would probably love to get involved. And then the other thing is, again, I do this very similar thing, and we rented a retail space right here in Mission to do it last year, next to Planet Fitness. It was huge. It wasn't quite big enough for us. but I think it'll be perfect for this. We had it for 3 weeks and I think Block actually manages that building. We paid,
A different block, but yes.
yes. But, someone we're kind of familiar with. We paid them $1,000, and that paid for the insurance on the building and the utilities for 3 weeks. You all would probably only need it for a week, so it would probably be a lot cheaper and, who knows, maybe, they would want to donate, but that would free up, the space at the community center, and it's still here in Mission. And there are plenty of open spaces if that's not the particular one that maybe business owners or property owners here in Mission would be interested in participating in. So I think just kind of opening it up a little bit more to the community and making a small change in this beautiful program might reap some benefits that can add to the sustainability of it all.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah, as Cheryl mentioned, I was the liaison to the Family Adoption Committee for a couple of years, until recently, and so I got to see a lot of the same things that she's describing. And Leah, I think a lot of your observations and suggestions are spot on, getting to some of the hearts of the less efficient parts of the system. The impact, I think, is tremendous of the program, but I really do want to also drive home the point that a lot of the effort that goes into it is equally tremendous. And I was left wondering how much of the same impact could we make with a lot less of, and not necessarily that anybody on the committee isn't happy doing it now, but that may not always be the case. And there's reasons that we have committees and continually appoint new people to things as they get tired or retire or whatever the case is. But there's just a lot of going to get turkeys and taking them to a freezer and moving them from here to there and moving gifts to this room and then wrapping them and moving them to this room. And there's a lot of overhead for the impact that we make. And I think, Leah, I think you got to the heart of how I feel about it as well, that the fun part is the gifts and being able to make that impact. And in terms of the food, even if we had to pay full retail price for food, in terms of gift cards, I think you can, my impression, I haven't done the numbers, and thank you for starting in on that. That's a big, important part of this. But my impression is that we could probably make a pretty similar impact just by saving a whole lot of staff hours on, public works. And then, of course, there's always that risk factor of what if the donations don't come in? What if it snows on the distribution day and public works is out? What if? So it's kind of tense just because we put so much on the volunteers on the committee and on the availability of city employees, and that isn't guaranteed. So it is kind of tense in that regard. I think food gift cards is probably a place that I gravitate to pretty quickly. It's not like we have a lot of, we have the people going out and buying the gifts that engages the community. No one's going out and buying the turkeys and taking them to the public works freezer. So nobody's really going to miss that part. I think that's an easy win to me. I'd be interested, first of all, in any kind of change we make, hearing from the social workers about that. I think they're plugged into their communities the best that anybody can be. I think this bounced around on the committee before, but I would love to see one of the school social workers on the committee, as if they need more things to do. But that's the first thing my wife, a social worker, said was, well, do you have any of them on the committee? Because she was overhearing some of the talk that Cheryl and I and Laura were having about this, and she said, sounds like you need a social worker on the committee. That insight into just the need and the respect for the family and the person and the empowerment of the family and their particular needs and wants and beliefs and preferences is a big deal. And I think the social workers are really plugged into that better than just about anybody. If I may keep droning on for a minute. Another impression I took away from my time as liaison on that committee was this is sort of a mission adjacent program. There's not really too much funding that actually changes hands. There's plenty of staff and employee time in terms of public works and space that we take up, right? But there's a whole bunch of donations that come in and go out, and not really a lot in the way of I guess, full-throated support for this, right? We don't really give a sizable portion of the budget to the committee for the program. Nor is the committee, I don't think, like ordained in our code or appointed or reappointed, right, by the council. So I think one question I always came away from the meetings when I was the liaison was, are we going to support this program and make it a program of the city, or are we not? And if we are, and I think it's favorable to most or all of us, perhaps we should make it a proper committee and give it some budgetary support, especially for saying we want to reduce the employee hours we put into it and sort of go towards a gift card model for food. So I think that just makes sense. I'd love to see it sort of pulled into, being an actual committee and brought into the fold in that regard. Yeah, I think that covers just about everything. I think you two have and Leah, with your comments, have really hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways.
Mary, did I see you? No? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I would just say I would agree with the gift cards for food proposal for all the reasons raised. I do think there would be increased costs because even though the program is paying for some of the food now, we are getting discounts and donations as well. So I think, moving to a gift card model and having, the committee and staff evaluate, does that mean we need to consider drawing back the scope to just Mission and Roland Park families? Or can we continue to support all of Northeast Johnson County, if we went that way, with that increased cost, could we get more partners like Leah was suggesting? Are there untapped donors? And I know the committee does a lot of work on that, so I'm not sure that there are. But to the extent that there are, bringing more people in to help with that budgetary piece, or like Ben said, considering, council financial contribution in future years as opposed to the staff contribution. I think the budget looks pretty healthy for this year, but again, the concern about what if, Sandhills and Rock Creek decide to donate to a different charity in I forget which month they did, November, December, the next year, how would we fill that gap? So I think 2025 or 2024 looks pretty good, but thinking about that sustainability into the future, that might be another piece to consider.
Yeah, and to the point of we get a good discount on food right now, yes, but how much do we spend either in time or money getting the turkeys and freezing them, and having to have a portable storage unit and everything else? Harvest, let me be clear, Harvesters has been a fantastic partner and absolutely as supportive as anybody possibly could have been every year, given the circumstances, and what they do is amazing. But I don't think this program is particularly set up to take advantage of somebody like Harvesters super efficiently. That's just sort of a mismatch in capabilities, I think.
Well, and just to kind of buy off on that, maybe Hy-Vee would be willing to give us a 10% discount if we're
Maybe.
buying all of the gift cards from them and everyone's coming to shop there. As a good community business, they might, be willing to help out in that regard. Or maybe a church would be willing to buy 10 gift cards, or, a company corporation, within Mission would be willing to take that on.
Yeah.
This is a long time program that's been really successful, and every piece or every element of what you defined is factual. It really is. It takes a toll. The police is drug all over the place too, where they could be on Johnson Drive getting those.
Could we take all the revenue from the tickets?
I would ask Kathy Lockhart to come up and give her opinion, because her opinion is valued. She's been with this city for years and years, and she brings so much to the table. She knows every family. She knows, because Susie created this and it's kind of just grown. But Kathy, come up and just give a couple words. You're such an asset to the community. We miss you.
I'm sure I asked you to come up and.
Well, I didn't, like I said, it's a wonderful program. It's very near and dear to my heart. I get emotional when I talk about it. I'm sorry, but I would agree that we need to speak with the social workers. That to me is first and foremost. I would ask their opinion on, hey, what's your thoughts on if we give gift cards instead of the food? And let them tell us that's great, or no, that won't work because these people don't have the time to go to the grocery store, or they don't have this, or they don't, some of these people don't have the transportation. Some of these people that come and get their gifts and their food, it's somebody else coming for them. And so, like I said, I really would like the social workers' input. And I don't mind asking around and see if one of the social workers would be happy to be on our committee. Like I said, they are very, very busy. These people do not slow down for anything. And they do know the families. They do know, sometimes it's year to year, we get the same families, but they know that. They know that these are the people that need the assistance. And so, like I said, I value their opinion. Again, I appreciate everything that Cheryl has done, all of the work she put together. It's great information. And I hope that we can just continue the program. I will say that Harvesters, like you said, is great. But I will say that Lynn Kring is he is the Harvester's man. He
Yeah, I
is,
almost wanted to speak up
yeah,
and say something.
yeah.
In a lot of ways, the logistics of this program
Yeah.
and John Lindkring, and that is a lot for one person.
yeah, he is on that Harvester's website day to day. He's 7 o'clock in the morning, he's there. And if we can get 20 turkeys that day, or if we can get this that day, he is there. He's on top of it. And that's where we get a lot of this. And I agree that the churches might help us out, but again, Trinity Lutheran does their own thing. And I know that St. Pius, they have a truck that comes in, and I don't think they're willing to donate all that to us. They're doing their own thing, a lot of these churches. So I don't think we can really count on them to participate with us. But again, I appreciate everything, all your thoughts, your considerations. And again, I hope that we can continue this program. The families are very appreciative. And if you've never been there and you can see the day they pick up their gifts and their food, so many of them are in tears and so grateful for what we do, and that they can't do it by themselves. So again, Susie was my mentor. And so for me to be able to carry on in her footsteps, it's great for me. And I retired, but I'm still here for you. And I hope I can continue to be here for you. So thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, I'll go ahead and close this discussion. Did want to thank Cheryl and Kathy both for just the time and thought you put into how to better enable this program. Much appreciated. Let's go back to the first discussion item, which is a discussion of the 2024 revised and 2025 proposed budgets from Laura Smith.
Thank you. And thank you for that accommodation. I appreciate that discussion, and I appreciate the time that Cheryl put in to collect the data, because that helps us make better decisions. And I think for all of us, we don't want to find ourselves not having been thoughtful and be surprised at some point where we can't pull this off and not be a conscious decision. So thank you. Okay, so budget, and I do not have a PowerPoint. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly this evening. I told my husband, should probably just get up and say, there's challenges every year. We always figure it out. We'll do the same thing this year, but I don't think that's how this works. So what I want to cover tonight is just sort of a recap of, and something is changing as we've talked about through this whole budget process, and something will change again before we have our community dialogue next week, and it will change again before we have our public hearings in August. But this evening, some of the work that we've been doing is really looking at taking that list of supplementals, and during our June 26th work session, we had kind of whittled that down to those things which we felt were the highest priorities on the list. And we've done even kind of further narrowing of that based on the parameters. We've been able to find some savings as a result of, again, the benefit and the curse of having to put your budget together so far in advance is that, every week that you get more data. So for example, workers' compensation premiums had been high because of experience for several years. Our experience has improved dramatically. And so we were able to save, go back and make some adjustments in those dollars and make some funds available for some of these supplemental pieces. So the budget that was presented, the general fund summary, and I didn't give you all the line item detail again. We'll have that available next week for the community dialogue on the budget, but that's reflective of all of those supplemental items which are included on the first page of the memorandum. For 2024, we've made adjustments to address the fire alarm panel replacement and deal with some air quality remediation. Both of those are really life, health, safety issues for this building. As we've talked about, facility issues are going to be probably the next big thing that we need to tackle in the as we move through 2025 and look to the 2026 budget. For 2025, we've included network switches, which is the next on our list of technology improvements, the direction finder survey, which would be keeping us on our 4-year cycle for that citizen satisfaction survey. We've also had tremendous success in sort of gauging public consensus and support for other major programs or initiatives that we're looking at. So certainly as we move forward with that in 2025, we can have conversations around what questions we might want to ask in addition to just overall satisfaction with city services. There's a police department flooring, and the chief will tell you and the mayor will tell you, we've had all these conversations around how much do we keep putting into this building, knowing that it's not serving our needs, but the flooring situation down there is pretty dramatic. And we talked about public works vehicle radios, which, as I mentioned at the last work session, from my perspective, is a safety issue for our crews out in the field. Asset management software and tablets. And so in order to accommodate that, we brought in about half of that expense from the stormwater utility fund and then reduced the transfer out of the general fund to streets by the other half. So $20,000 reduction and $20,000 in to fund that, because that will be primarily used to support the inventory of our street and stormwater infrastructure systems. And then as we continue to build that out and include other things, the ongoing annual maintenance for that software would just become a general fund expense. And then again, the exhaust fans for public works, again, another sort of safety issue. Those are original to the building's construction in 2007. And we have some concerns about the continued life expectancy of particularly the carbon monoxide sensors. We have the tremendous benefit of being able to get all of our equipment parked indoors, which helps to extend the life of that. But with that comes the need to make sure we're addressing the exhaust as well. The remaining requests that we have are just going to be held, and they may be incorporated into budgets either 2024 or 25 if resources become available between now and the end of the year or as we move through next year. Financial management would be sort of at the top of our priority list. It's been up and down in terms of funding. The other big, and I don't think I addressed it in the memo, we've talked about the work that we're doing with enterprise mobility to look at leasing our fleet. And we have a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks, follow up to the original proposal. So we received a proposal, staff has sort of vetted that. We've made some changes, looked at some recommendations. And so hopefully before we get to the August committee meeting, we'll be able to have a much clearer picture of what that would look like and how that would be funded going forward. The other things included in the memo, so we've talked generally about, we started this year with the capital improvement program, and we'll bring that back full circle next week and as we move into August. But there are several other funds. We have a total of, I believe, close to 20 individual funds that we maintain under the umbrella of the city's budget. The largest of those is the general fund. Many other of those are required either by statute or but dedicated street sales tax, for example, or dedicated parks and recreation sales tax, special highway, some of these things. And so from an auditing perspective, we're required to maintain all of those, and they're are not always opportunities to share revenues across the lines of those. The Equipment Reserve and Replacement Fund is intended to sort of build up reserves and help us manage the routine replacement of city vehicles and equipment. We created that in 2017 and made a contribution, excuse me, from the general fund. We have been able until this year to keep up with the annual expenses with the resale of our surplus equipment. We're at a deficit right now because of some supply chain issues and some increases in expenses. So we still have some issues to solve, which the proposal from Enterprise may or may not do. So we may need to look at bringing that back in line. Currently, we don't have any vehicle or equipment requests in the 2025 budget, but the replacement of at least 4 of our frontline patrol vehicles in the police department is a priority. This would allow for the replacement of the oldest vehicles in the fleet while the department continues to evaluate sort of electrification or conversion of the fleet to either hybrid or electric. I think the chief had mentioned a couple meetings ago that they're going to attend a conference, I believe in August. Well, they'll have the opportunity to really sort of get up close and experience some of that equipment. Special Alcohol Fund. So the state levies a 10% alcohol tax on the sale of any drink sold by clubs, caterers, or drinking establishments. And then 30% of that tax is allocated to the state and 70% to the city or county where that tax is collected. And then there's also a city size or population formula. So for a city of Mission size, state statute requires us to allocate a third of that money to the general fund, a third to special alcohol, and a third to a special parks and recreation fund. And then in the alcohol tax fund, those funds may only be used to support programs whose principal purpose is alcoholism and drug abuse prevention or treatment. And so when we look at alcohol tax distributions for Mission in 2023, we were just in total shy of about $400,000. Distributions for 2024 were budgeted at 390 and were estimated at 412 for 2025. And so we'll proportion those out. We have used the special alcohol funds historically to support the mental health co-responder program. And then our contribution to the Drug and Alcoholism Council through UCS. So they manage a grant program and relieves us of the administrative responsibility and task of doing that. We've had some savings in that fund in recent years because the city of Merriam, who we partner with in the co-responder program, has been successful in securing grants. They have indicated to us, don't count on that for next year. So we've kind of budgeted for our portion of the full expense for the 2 mental health co-responders. We feel like that's an important addition in support, not only for the community, but for the officers in our department. The Drug and Alcoholism Council, we have not yet received their formal request for the 2025 budget. This year, we've contributed about $60,000. I increased that slightly to about $65,000. But if you looked at the fund pages, we are sitting on fairly healthy fund balances. So we'll probably need to look at what other options and opportunities we have to expend those dollars. Special Parks and Recreation Fund is actually part and parcel of the capital improvement program. So it combined with the Parks and Recreation sales tax resources are used to fund programs and services related to outdoor parks, community center, or the Mission Family Aquatic Center. And so revenues, we were talking at the last work session about transitioning some of the outdoor park maintenance expenses currently carried in the general fund, both personnel and the contractual maintenance expenses, to the sales tax fund. As we evaluated the Special Parks and Recreation Fund, revenues are sufficient there to transition the contractual maintenance at a minimum into Special Parks and Recreation Fund. So we know we will be able to sort of shift that I'm not sure. I need to do some additional research about whether or not we are allowed to use special parks and recreation funds for personnel expenses. So we'll wrap that conversation up here in the next couple of weeks. The Mission Convention and Visitors Bureau Fund is the fund where we collect and track transient guest tax receipts, so hotel, motel sort of tax. So we do have Wood Spring Suites, which is generating transient guest tax for us. Again, statutory limitations on how those funds may be spent. Currently, it's 9%, which is the maximum that can be charged under the state statute. But we are tasked with spending those resources to attract residents and visitors to our community to spend dollars in support of our local businesses. So since the transient guest tax was put in place, we've primarily used those funds to produce the Mission magazine. So it provides an affordable advertising opportunity for our mission businesses, highlights our mission businesses, and I think has been really successful. For many years, it served as a pass-through for the family adoption program. That was became somewhat of an accounting nightmare. And so we weren't using transient guest tax dollars for that purpose. We just ran it through that fund. We now have a separate fund for family adoption revenues and expenses. But we've been carrying many donations to the tune of about $81,000 in the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation's charitable fund that we'll need to withdraw and are owed back to the MCVB fund. And that allows us for the purchase of street banners and business support. And actually, in evaluating the number of banners that we have and the designs that we've done in recent years, I don't think we're going to do a new winter banner this year. We have plenty of options there. We also reduced the expenses related to the production of the Mission magazine. We transitioned from 5 issues each year to 4. And then we have continued the business support in the 2025 budget. That was sort of a program that Emily had envisioned in terms of some advertising and promotion. We need to sort of revisit and revamp that. And we'll do so kind of reevaluating options during the latter part of 2024. So we left that funding there. And then we also left, we put an additional $45,000 in the budget for next year, because one of the things we've heard through our business forums is, you know, what more can we do to help support them? I was talking with the mayor about, you know, the potential of using those revenues to expand the business improvement grant program. Again, I want to test and make sure that that would be an acceptable expense as it relates to the transient guest tax. Solid Waste Utility Fund accounts for the fees that we collect from single-family residential properties, which are used to support the annual trash recycling and yard waste contract that we have with GFL. Also, the once-a-month bulky item collection, and that contract has historically been funded through a combination of those fees and a subsidy or transfer from the general fund. GFL has requested an increase of 3% for the 2025 contract, which is what's allowed, sort of the cap that's allowed under their current contract, which would take the per household rate from $1,808 per month to $1,862 per month. The CPI for trash collection service for the period of April 2023 to April 2024 was actually 5.8%. So the increase that they've requested is below what that average 12-month trend has been. We currently collect fees from approximately 2,900 households in the city, and we certify that each year to the county, and that's assessed on the annual tax bill. So right now, our residents are contributing just under $200 annually for all of those residential curbside or less than $16 a month services. We're recommending that the solid waste utility fee for residents remain the same in 2025. And we would just absorb. We've been able to reduce the transfer that's required from the general fund. And so we would recommend that we would just keep that flat as we evaluate. Also, this is the fund where we're paying for the introduction and the continuation of the cardboard recycling program that was introduced. In fact, I think we are getting ready to expand that. Because we've had some requests for that, and we anticipate annual costs for that between $5,000 and $9,000 dollars. And so in order to support the solid waste utility fund, transfer from the general fund has been increased to $55,000 each year. We originally had targeted 40,000 in this year, but I think in order to continue to support the programs in support of the businesses, it makes sense to do that. I just mentioned the ARPA fund here because we saw in 2023, and so it's reflected in the budget actuals, the $1.5 million that we transferred into the general fund to replace lost revenue, and then that was allocated out to a variety of projects. So we have obligated those. We've done our reporting. We will probably have some final reporting to do through 2026. But that's sort of taken, we were holding that in abeyance, trying to see where we would be at the end of the pandemic and how we wanted to spend those dollars, but we have spent all of those dollars. And then the 2 Rock Creek drainage districts, which we have talked about earlier this evening with the intent to exceed revenue neutral rate resolutions. Rock Creek Drainage District number 1 is effectively the gateway site. And Rock Creek Drainage District number 2 extends from Roland Drive all the way through Lamar and essentially follows the creek channel. And we passed charter resolutions many years ago, which allow us the flexibility to use drainage district revenues to make improvements in any area of the city that flows into that creek or those watersheds. And so we've essentially taken the drainage district revenues, transferred those to the stormwater utility fund, and then use those for our projects. You can see Rock Creek Drainage District number 1 doesn't generate a lot currently. That would be expected to change at some point if you have a development on that property. And then Rock Creek Drainage District number 2. And there are some residential properties that are actually included in Rock Creek Drainage District number 2. So they're actually getting sort of 2 mill levies from the city of Mission, our regular one. And they have been since 2007. And then the TIF and CID funds. So we're required to maintain separate funds for all of the various development and redevelopment projects. We currently have several active projects which were included in the memo: Mission Crossing, Cornerstone Commons, which is Mission Crossing is Wellstone, Culver's, Chick-fil-A, that development. Cornerstone Commons is Natural Grocer, Mission Trails Apartments or the Locale, Capitol Federal, and the lanes at Mission Bowl. And we are in the process of kind of going back and doing some analysis as a staff. We make distributions from that fund in accordance with approved development agreements. And so we are only able to reimburse the developer for certain approved costs that have been vetted and certified. And then we receive TIF distributions from the county. And so we verify all of those things, and then we distribute on a quarterly basis to the developers. So we're in the process of kind of looking at creating some updated tracking mechanisms for the various projects that we have. We believe that there are potential opportunities just based on the amount of revenue that we've received, that some of these projects may not go the full anticipated 20 years, for example, of a TIF. So it's just interesting, I think, and will be helpful for us to look at when we think those revenues might come back online for us. That's really all I have for tonight. During next week's community dialogue, we'll kind of pull all of this together. There'll be a lot more just charts and graphs. Hopefully there will be some public that comes to dialogue with us on the budget. But we will also include a summary of how the 2025 budget aligns with the 5 key performance areas that we have established, which include infrastructure, parks and recreation, municipal operations, sustainability, and economic development. And you may recall previous year's budget, we've just broken that down and said, here's the amount of money that we're spending generally in alignment with each of those objectives. And then following next week's community dialogue, which will be at 6 o'clock ahead of our legislative meeting. We'll finalize the budgets in preparation for our last review at the August 7th Finance Administration Committee meeting. And then we will have our public hearings on August 21st at our regular legislative meeting. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Ben has a furrowed brow, but I don't know if he has a
Oh,
question.
No, I had a thought and I'm trying to get it back.
I'm glad somebody else suffers
Over
from
here for a
that
second,
problem.
Christine. No. Come back? No.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Let's let it go.
You do it from the.
Okay. If there are not any questions, we'll move on. Thank you for the presentation, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Our final item this evening is a review of implementation of House Bill 2562 related to restrictive covenant language from Justin Carroll.
So this is just kind of summarizing the process that was laid out as part of that legislation. You've probably seen in the news, the story with the restricted, the covenants and everything like that. The county just released the process that they've outlined to get those removed. And so that's just kind of what this goes through since all of that went into effect on July 1. And so basically what has to happen is for anyone that's interested, they can go down to the county's, their offices in Olathe, the administrative building. They kind of have like a public access terminal set up so that anyone can search and look. And if they find anything like that, there's a recording fee. They can get that removed from their deed. And so we did ask them that that is the only place they can do that. They can't stand one up at the Northeast office, and you can only do it online if you're basically a title company. So they allow a subscription, and the only people that have those subscriptions are title companies is who have those available to do it online. And so that's kind of the process. And with this bill, the other part of that is it is a little wonky as it pertains to HOAs. And if it's an active HOA, the HOA themselves has to seek that out and take care of that for their neighborhood. And then if a city, if it's determined that the HOA is defunct or something, there is kind of then the city could look into that on behalf of them at that point. But if it's the big kicker is if there's an active HOA, it's on the burdens on them to look into this. So the last piece of this was just kind of, we were just going to start pushing this all out accordingly with just instructions how to do it. We do have the list of the active HOAs, so we're going to reach out to them directly and kind of give them a heads up and just provide that information to them as well that this is available, and just kind of keep pushing it out accordingly to kind of just get the word out. So that's kind of the plan for now.
Great. Do we have any idea? I know this is, welcome to the recording deeds and things at the recorder's office. How many pages most people have to record to get these removed?
I do not know how many. I think it's a case by case.
Yeah.
Depending on how.
I don't know if they want to, hopefully they don't want to re-record a whole stack of documents. Hopefully it's just 1 or 2 pages.
Just wherever. Yeah, I would think it's just where they're located, but.
Okay.
No other questions or comments? Okay. All right. Thanks, Justin. Are there any department updates tonight?
No, other than just a reminder, we do have our community dialogue at 6 o'clock next Wednesday, legislative meeting at 7. We will have a few special presentations, including one from the auditors on the 2023 audit. So that will be included in your packet this Friday. And typically, I mean, the audit is what the audit is, but we typically ask you, they'll make a presentation, and then under new business on your agenda, I will ask you to just formally accept that, kind of a procedural issue. And I think that's all I have for this evening.
Questions or comments regarding those updates? Doesn't look like it. Okay, well, with nothing else, it is now 8:41 p.m. And with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee.